Yesterday, the mirror cracked, and frozen fractures blossomed against my reflection, while my face shifted like waves, rippling along the shore of a vast lake where last week I killed a little girl. Last night, I stared into the cracks and found an empty spider web stretched across my reflection. And suddenly, I was the spider spinning a beautiful trap as... In 2017, I went through one of the most difficult periods of time in my life. Growing up as an insecure teenager in modern culture led to an extreme sense of self-loathing. I would place my worth in the world around me, my grades, my abilities, the opinions of others, instead of anchoring it within. In 2017, long-term bad habits turned into an eating disorder. I would eat one meal a day, if that. Looking back, I see that year I hit some of my lowest lows and struggled with an issue that I was too young to fully understand. Yet, in retrospect, I see that it was this set of circumstances which led me to discover poetry. Cheesy, I know. The idea of poetry has always appealed to me. There's something romantic about a poem, something exclusive about the way people speak about their favorite pieces. But whenever I pick a poem up for myself, I wouldn't understand a thing. But in 2017, a new poet was popping up on all of my social media feeds. Rupi Kaur is a modern poet who writes short, easy-to-understand pieces about the female struggle. Her books spread like wildfire, touching the hearts of young women all around the world. For me, this inclusion of poetry in mainstream media broke open the ironclad gates to literature, because suddenly, poetry didn't seem so scary anymore. It could be stylistically simple, easy to understand, and still create an impact on the readers. So, like the copycat that I was, I attempted to join this realm of Instagram poets. Whenever I was feeling helpless or sad, I would write down my emotions on whatever device I had access to. Through writing, I was able to say things that I couldn't speak and express emotions that I didn't understand. I found power in writing down my pain because it gave me the ability to transform my hardships into something beautiful. It felt like I was taking something back from the experiences that caused me so much heartache. So most of my early pieces were centered around my own struggle with a low self-esteem. Every day was a constant battle to live in my own skin. I was facing these emotions that I couldn't understand and an issue that I didn't want to publicize. But through writing, I could focus on a single feeling or event and discover what lies beneath. If I could turn back the clock, I would tell myself, one day you'll feel scared and frail, droopy eyes, hunger at its peak, wondering why you'd mistreat that body that never gave a... You'll know that nothing is worth health, and if you could do it again, you would trade all the lost pounds for a second chance. How you'll miss feeling full instead of weak. How I miss the girl I used to be. I specifically remember writing this piece after looking at photos and videos of myself from when I was younger. I saw myself carefree, confident, happy, as the exact opposite of who I was back then. So as I looked at these past memories, I found myself wishing that I could somehow stop that little girl in the photos from growing up to be like me. As I wrote, my nostalgia became complicated with a sense of regret, regret that I didn't even know I felt. Of course, there were equally poems built from success and motivation. I think I truly understood recovery one rainy Thursday afternoon when I looked up and saw the sky. Clouds of the darkest gray were mixed with puffs of pure white. Beams of sunlight shone through the haze like heaven's gate had been opened, casting a warm glow on the cool rain. What struck me was that the horizon was all beautifully mixed together, like different shades on the same palette. I had always believed that the most important part of rain was the rainbow that came after it, but I understand now. Recovery is not about the rainbow after the rain, because the rain always pours, the sun always sets. Recovery is learning to find the beauty in the darkness. I was walking home from the school bus one day when I looked up and saw the sky. For some reason, that day I looked up and found hope. That lunchtime at school, when I skipped my lunch, as per usual, one of my friends offered me a small piece of her cookie. I realized that she noticed all the meals I was skipping, and that every single lunchtime she would offer me a small piece of whatever it was that she was eating. For some reason, that day I looked up and found this in the sky and saw a sign. A sign that things were going to be okay, and a sign that I wasn't alone. To write this poem, I actually voice recorded a memo on my phone right then and there, hoping that when things weren't so great, I could look back and find the sunlight once again. Now, all of this doesn't mean that my early poems were actually any good. To be honest, all of my first pieces were sentences formatted to look like poetry. They lacked any technical skill, and to call them real poems would be a stretch. But while they were simple, my poems were able to express emotions in ways that I could not otherwise manage. In the MYP program, all 10th graders are required to do a personal project. And for mine, I decided to bind the poems I'd written into a book of poetry titled "The Sun Will Rise," about eating disorders. Now, to be honest, in terms of writing, this book isn't something that I'm particularly proud of. But I'll always remember the moments at the end of the project. Every year, the 10th graders display their products to the school. As I talked to the people who were visiting my display, I realized that the emotions I expressed through my poetry was shared. On a few instances, girls actually cried reading what I wrote. Linguistically, my poems were too simple, undeveloped, and kind of lame. I knew this even back then. But the expression of genuine emotions was still able to impact people who were facing the same issues as I was. This is the power of writing, I realized. Writing is more than just that. It's what you give, what you get, and what you create. The pain, the beauty, and the impact. For me, the goal of writing shifted from fixing myself to impacting others. And this required me to change the way that I wrote. While people often imagine writing as dependent on a specific skill set, writing poetry in itself is something that's largely personal. For me, writing has always been a matter of molding my thoughts onto paper. In the beginning, this was a matter of formatting. I would write down my emotions and simply press enter to make it look like a poem. But when I truly began to write for others, I had to pick up technique. I always knew Uth, but when we read the poem Tulips in English class, I began to follow her work. Plath is a famous confessional poet. Her pieces speak of bloody performances, a horseback ride early in the morning, or a violently red pot of tulips. Yet, in essence, all of her poems are centered around her own personal struggle and experiences. Readers are able to resonate so much with Plath's poetry because in her pieces, pain is turned into something that's shared. For example, in Tulips, Plath writes of a violently red pot of tulips in a sterile white hospital room as a metaphor for her own battle with depression. But when we read Plath's poems, we aren't just reading her story into something shared, something discovered, and something that can be reflected in the soul of any reader. From Plath, I learned this invaluable lesson to show readers what I wanted to say instead of just telling them. This year, 2020, was the year where I developed my writing the most, and this is largely because I learned to read the world around me. I began to critically view the things that I saw, constantly analyzing my own thoughts and reactions, thinking, how might I be able to use this in my poetry? So yes, the trope of the melodramatic artist does indeed have some merit. But this was vital to me because I began to actively draw inspiration from the things around me. For example, when I watched the teen slam poet Bianca Phillips perform her poem Stay With Me on YouTube, which was infused with double meanings to reflect her conflicting emotions, I began to play around with twists on words and moments of caesura in my own poetry. Or when I wrote an essay about Albert Camus in English class, I suddenly began to toy with this idea of existentialism. So the phrases endless human struggle or cold, brutal universe would frequently appear in my own poems. And of course, most importantly, during lockdown, I binged every single season of Criminal Minds. And all of my poems were infused with gruesome images that reflected the human psyche. When viewing what's around you, ask, how can I find a piece of myself in what I see? What inspires me, and what does it inspire me to do? Why does something impact me, and how does the world around me make me feel? Find these answers and write them down. The most common misconception about being a writer is that writing is based on talent. I started off my journey as a writer as an ignorant teenager who was over-dramatizing my emotions. Today, I am only slightly older, slightly less ignorant, and just as dramatic. But I've learned to view the world around me in a constant search for meaning. A meaning that isn't rooted in the intricacies of the universe, but a meaning that is created and harvested within ourselves. So the power of words is one that we can all harness, because while this power lies in its impact on others, its roots are created in ourselves. So in that, words must first change our own identities, mindsets, and outlooks before it can even begin to impact the world around us. In order to understand language, we must first understand ourselves. I wish there were a clear method to achieving this, but with all of this being said, I think I can only leave you with one thing. As Ernest Hemingway once said, write hard and clear about what hurts. Thank you.